Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people's story. My boyfriend and I thought we'd found the perfect place to start fresh after years of cramped city living. The house was beautiful, the street was tree-lined, and everything seemed peaceful. If only I'd known what we were walking into. I work as a financial analyst for a mid-sized firm downtown, so I appreciate order and attention to detail. My boyfriend is a freelance graphic designer who works from home, rides a vintage motorcycle, and has some tasteful tattoos. We're both in our late 20s and pretty low-key people who just wanted somewhere quiet to build our life together. The first few weeks were perfect. We painted the living room, set up his home office, and I started a small herb garden in the backyard. The neighbors seemed friendly enough, waving when they saw us outside. Everything felt normal until I started noticing the woman across the street. She was probably in her 50s, always perfectly dressed even when she was just checking her mailbox. Her lawn looked like something from a magazine, not a single blade of grass out of place. I'd catch her watching us sometimes when we were outside, but I figured she was just curious about the new neighbors. The first real sign something was off came about 3 weeks after we moved in. I found a laminated sheet of paper tucked into our mailbox with specific rules about holiday decorations and how they couldn't be put up more than 14 days before any holiday. It was signed by the Homeowners Association president, but seemed oddly specific and targeted since we hadn't put up any decorations at all. My boyfriend just laughed it off, saying every neighborhood had at least one person who took things too seriously. I wanted to believe he was right, but something about finding that paper felt deliberate and personal. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing her more. Every time I left for work in the morning, she'd be at her window. When I came home, there she was again. If my boyfriend was outside working on his motorcycle, she'd find some reason to be in her front yard, always watching. It was starting to feel less like casual curiosity and more like surveillance. The real confrontation happened on a Saturday morning in early fall. I was bringing in groceries from my car when she appeared at the end of my driveway. She was wearing a crisp white blouse and had her hair pulled back in a perfect bun, looking like she was heading to a board meeting rather than having a casual neighborhood chat. She started with fake pleasantries, commenting on how nice the weather was and asking how we were settling in. I was polite but brief, trying to get my frozen items inside before they thawed. That's when she got to what she really wanted to talk about. She told me she'd been thinking about our conversation and wanted to give me some friendly advice. She said she'd been watching us and could tell I was a nice, normal girl who probably came from a good family. Then she said something that still makes my blood boil just thinking about it. She suggested that my boyfriend wasn't really the right type of person for this neighborhood. She mentioned his freelance work, calling it unstable and unreliable. She criticized his motorcycle, saying it was disruptive and inappropriate. Then she had the nerve to tell me that I was wasting my potential and bringing down property values by associating with someone like him. I was so shocked that for a moment I couldn't even respond. She kept talking, saying she had a nephew who was a successful dentist and would be perfect for someone like me. She actually suggested I should break up with my boyfriend and let her introduce me to someone more suitable. When I finally found my voice, I told her that my relationship was absolutely none of her business and that I had no interest in her nephew or her opinions about my life choices. I was trying to stay calm, but I was furious at her presumption. Her whole demeanor changed when I refused. The fake smile disappeared and her eyes went cold. She told me that some people needed time to see what was really best for them, and that she hoped I'd come to my senses before I made any permanent mistakes. Then she said something that should have been a bigger warning sign than it was at the time. She said we'd see about that, with this tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. I went inside and told my boyfriend what had happened. He was as amazed as I was at her nerve, but we both figured she was just a busybody who'd eventually get bored and move on to someone else. We had no idea what we were actually dealing with. The harassment started small. Every time I left the house or came home, she'd be at her window watching. At first I thought it might be coincidental, but it became obvious she was deliberately monitoring our movements. She started showing up places where I'd be running errands, always acting surprised to see me, but making pointed comments about my choices or my boyfriend. One day at the grocery store, she made a loud comment to the cashier about how some people made poor life decisions while staring directly at me. Another time, she was parked outside my office building during my lunch break, just sitting in her car watching the entrance. When I walked past her car, she rolled down the window and asked if I'd given any more thought to our conversation. Then the notes started appearing. They were always typed, never handwritten, left on my car windshield or tucked under my door. The messages were vague but threatening, saying things like she was watching and hoped I'd make the right choice soon. One note suggested that some people were bad influences and that smart women knew when to make changes in their lives. She also started leaving things on our doorstep. A brochure for an apartment complex across town was left addressed to my boyfriend. Another time, she left a business card for a life coach with a note saying some people needed professional help to see their situations clearly. The worst part was that she started spreading stories about us to other neighbors. I found out from the woman next door that she'd been telling people my boyfriend was unreliable and possibly dangerous and that I was some naive girl who didn't know any better. She was systematically trying to isolate us and turn the neighborhood against us. The situation escalated significantly when I started finding evidence that she was getting bolder about her surveillance. I came home one day to find footprints in the soft soil of my flower beds right under my bedroom window. Someone had clearly been standing there looking into our house. A few nights later, my boyfriend found a note left directly on his motorcycle seat after someone had removed the cover he always put on it. The note said that some people would be better off finding somewhere else to live, and that accidents could happen to people who didn't listen to good advice. The final straw was the night I was home alone while my boyfriend was visiting his family. I was getting ready for bed when I heard someone trying the handle on our back door. I froze, listening as whoever it was tested the door several times before walking away. I was terrified and called my boyfriend immediately, but by the time he got home, there was no sign of anyone. That's when we realized this had gone way beyond neighborhood drama. This woman was genuinely unstable and potentially dangerous. We talked about calling the police, but we knew it would be our word against the Homeowners Association president, and we didn't have any real proof of what she'd been doing. Instead, we decided to get smart about gathering evidence. My background in financial analysis meant I was good at documentation and building cases, and my boyfriend's design skills meant he could present information in compelling ways. We decided to set a trap and let her hang herself with her own behavior. We invested in a comprehensive security system with high-definition cameras covering every angle of our property. We got a doorbell camera, yard cameras, and even a dash cam for my car. Everything was set to record continuously with motion detection alerts sent directly to our phones. I started keeping a detailed log of every incident, no matter how small. Every time I saw her watching us, every strange encounter, every note or item left on our property. I documented dates, times, locations, and took photos of everything. I treated it like building a case file because that's essentially what I was doing. Within just a few weeks, we had captured more than enough evidence of her stalking behavior. The cameras caught her following me with her car when I ran errands. We had footage of her standing in our flower beds looking through windows. The doorbell camera recorded her leaving notes and packages on our doorstep, always looking around to make sure no one was watching. But the real breakthrough came when we realized she was a complete hypocrite about the Homeowners Association rules she was so obsessed with enforcing on everyone else. Our cameras captured her leaving her trash bins out for days after pickup, which was explicitly against the rules she'd given us. We caught her using an unauthorized paint color on her window trim. Most importantly, we documented that she was having construction work done in her backyard without the proper permits that were required by association bylaws. My boyfriend compiled everything into a professional presentation that looked like something you'd see in a corporate boardroom. He created video compilations, annotated maps showing her rule violations, and even charts tracking the frequency of her stalking behavior. The presentation was titled, "A Review of Community Security and Bylaw Adherence," and it was devastating. We found a provision in the Homeowners Association bylaws that allowed any resident to add an item to the agenda of the annual meeting with enough petition signatures. We went door to door throughout the neighborhood, not mentioning her specifically, but framing our petition around the need for transparent and fair enforcement of rules for all residents. It turned out that a lot of our neighbors were fed up with her petty tyranny and arbitrary rule enforcement. People had stories about being harassed over minor infractions while she ignored her own violations. We got more than enough signatures to add our agenda item to the annual meeting. The night of the Homeowners Association meeting, the community center was packed. She was at the front table running the meeting with her usual iron fist, completely oblivious to what was coming. She was in her element, clearly enjoying the power and control she had over the proceedings. When it came time for our agenda item, I stood up and explained that we wanted to present some findings related to community bylaws and security. I kept my tone professional and neutral, just like I would during a client presentation at work. My boyfriend started the slideshow, and the first section focused on rule enforcement consistency. We showed clear video evidence of her multiple violations of the same rules she'd been aggressively enforcing on other residents. Her trash bins left out for days, the unauthorized paint color, the unpermitted construction project. The room started buzzing as people recognized the hypocrisy. She tried to interrupt and dismiss the violations as trivial, but the evidence was right there on the screen. You could see her getting flustered as her authority was being systematically undermined in front of the entire neighborhood. Then we moved to the second part of the presentation. I explained that our main concern was about safety and harassment within the community. The room went completely silent as my boyfriend played a compilation video showing months of stalking behavior. The footage was undeniable. There she was on our doorbell camera leaving threatening notes. The dash cam showed her following my car multiple times. Most damning was the footage of her peering through our windows and the night vision camera that caught her testing our back door handle. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Neighbors were outraged and demanding explanations. The other board members looked shocked and horrified. Before she could recover or try to spin the situation, one of the other board members called for an immediate vote of no confidence in her presidency. The vote was almost unanimous. Only 2 people abstained, and even her closest allies on the board voted against her. She was stripped of her position on the spot. But we weren't done yet. I stood up again and explained that the stalking had made us genuinely fear for our safety, and that we'd invited 2 police officers to attend the meeting to discuss community security concerns. The officers, who had been standing quietly at the back of the room, stepped forward. I formally handed them a flash drive containing our entire evidence package and stated that I wanted to press charges for stalking and harassment. The room was dead silent as the officers took the evidence and asked her to come with them for questioning. She was escorted out of the room she'd once ruled, completely humiliated and facing criminal charges. The whole thing had taken less than an hour, but it was the culmination of months of careful planning and documentation. The aftermath was everything we could have hoped for. She was formally charged with stalking and harassment. Rather than face a trial, she pleaded guilty to lesser charges and received a lengthy restraining order, community service, and mandatory counseling. The conviction made her a pariah in the neighborhood she'd once controlled. Within 3 months, a for sale sign appeared on her perfectly manicured lawn. She couldn't handle living somewhere that everyone knew what she'd done, and honestly, most of the neighbors were relieved to see her go. The neighborhood transformed almost immediately. The new homeowners association board was reasonable and fair, focusing on actual community concerns rather than petty power trips. People felt free to express themselves without fear of arbitrary punishment for minor rule infractions. My boyfriend and I became something of local heroes, which was never our intention but wasn't unwelcome either. Neighbors would stop us to thank us for standing up to her and tell us stories about their own experiences with her harassment that they'd been too intimidated to report. Our relationship actually got stronger through the whole ordeal. Going through something that intense together showed us that we could handle anything as a team. We learned to trust each other completely and to stand up for what was right, even when it was difficult. Looking back, I'm proud of how we handled the situation. We didn't let her drive us away or make us victims. Instead, we used our skills and resources to build an airtight case that she couldn't deny or escape from. We proved that even the biggest bully can be brought down with patience, planning, and solid evidence. The experience taught me that you don't have to accept harassment or intimidation, even from people in positions of authority. Sometimes the right response to a bully isn't to ignore them or try to avoid conflict, but to document everything and fight back strategically. We came to this neighborhood looking for a quiet life, and in the end, by refusing to stay quiet when it mattered, we finally got exactly what we were looking for. The woman who tried to destroy our relationship and drive us away ended up being the one who had to leave, and we're still here, happier than ever. The best part is that the new neighbors who bought her house are a lovely young couple who actually appreciate having creative, independent people in the neighborhood. They've become good friends, and sometimes we all sit on our front porches in the evening, enjoying the peace and quiet that she tried so hard to take away from us. Justice isn't always swift, but when you have patience and you build your case carefully, it can be absolutely devastating to the people who deserve it most. Update 6 months later, the full aftermath and some surprising revelations. I thought my story was over after she moved away, but honestly, the aftermath has been even more interesting than the original drama. A lot of people have been asking for updates, so here's what's happened since the Homeowners Association meeting that changed everything. First, let me address the legal stuff since that's what most people want to know about. She ended up pleading guilty to misdemeanor stalking and harassment charges. The prosecutor told us that our documentation was some of the most thorough evidence they'd ever seen in a case like this. Having months of video footage, detailed logs, and clear patterns of behavior made it impossible for her to claim it was all a misunderstanding. She received 18 months of probation, 200 hours of community service, mandatory anger management and psychological counseling, and a 5-year restraining order that covers both my boyfriend and me. The restraining order includes a provision that she can't come within 500 feet of our home, which effectively banned her from the entire neighborhood since our street layout made that impossible. But here's where things got really interesting. About 2 weeks after she moved out, we got a visit from her replacement as Homeowners Association president. He came by with a folder full of documents and an expression that was half apologetic, half amazed. It turns out that when the new board took over and started going through the association's files, they discovered she'd been running some serious scams for years. She'd been collecting fines from residents for violations that didn't actually exist in the bylaws. She'd also been inflating maintenance costs and pocketing the difference, particularly for landscaping services that were being provided by a company owned by her brother. The new president showed us copies of fake violation notices she'd sent to dozens of residents over the years, collecting hundreds of dollars in bogus fines. Some people had been paying monthly penalties for things like improper mailbox positioning and unauthorized garden plant varieties that were completely made up. They found evidence that she'd embezzled over $15,000 from the Homeowners Association over 3 years. The board filed a civil lawsuit against her for the stolen money, and she ended up having to sell her new house to pay the settlement. Apparently, she's now living in a small apartment across town and working at a retail job to make ends meet. The discovery of the financial crimes also explained a lot about her behavior toward us. Several neighbors came forward after the meeting to tell us that she'd been targeting anyone who might pose a threat to her authority or question her methods. We weren't the first people she'd harassed, just the first ones who'd had the resources and determination to fight back properly. One of our neighbors told us that she'd tried to force them to remove a vegetable garden by claiming it violated aesthetic standards, even though there was nothing in the bylaws about gardens. Another couple had been getting monthly fines for their dog barking, despite the fact that they didn't even own a dog. People had been too intimidated by her position to challenge these obviously fraudulent violations. The most shocking revelation came when the woman who bought her old house found something while renovating the basement. Hidden behind some storage shelves, she discovered a box containing detailed files on almost every resident in the neighborhood. The files included photos taken without consent, notes about daily routines, family information, and what appeared to be plans for harassment campaigns against people she didn't like. My file was the thickest, containing printed copies of my social media posts, photos of my boyfriend's motorcycle taken from multiple angles, and detailed notes about our work schedules and daily routines. She'd been planning her campaign against us for weeks before she ever approached me about breaking up with my boyfriend. The police were called again when the files were discovered, and they're now part of an ongoing investigation into potential identity theft and privacy violations. It turns out that stalking us was just the tip of the iceberg for her criminal behavior. But not everything about the aftermath has been dark and dramatic. The neighborhood has completely transformed since the new Homeowners Association board took over. They eliminated most of the petty rules she'd created and focused on actual community improvements instead of harassment and control. They organized a neighborhood block party this past summer, which was the first community event anyone could remember that was actually fun instead of feeling like a mandatory compliance meeting. People who'd been afraid to talk to each other for years because of her divisive tactics finally got to know their neighbors properly. My boyfriend and I have become inadvertently famous in local homeowners association circles. We've been contacted by residents in other neighborhoods dealing with similar situations, asking for advice on how to document and fight back against harassment. My boyfriend actually created a guide for gathering evidence that's been shared in several community forums. The legal process also led to some positive changes in how our city handles homeowners association complaints. The police department now has better protocols for dealing with HOA-related harassment, and there's been discussion about requiring associations to have their bylaws reviewed by the city to prevent the kind of fake rules she was enforcing. As for our relationship, going through something that intense together was like a crash course in partnership and trust. We learned that we could rely on each other completely when things got serious, and that we made a pretty effective team when we combined our different skills. We ended up getting engaged about 4 months after the whole situation was resolved. The proposal wasn't related to the drama, but my boyfriend later admitted that seeing how I handled the harassment made him realize I was definitely the person he wanted to face life's challenges with. The engagement party was held in our backyard, and pretty much the entire neighborhood showed up to celebrate. It was a far cry from the isolation and hostility she'd tried to create around us. People kept thanking us for standing up to her and making the neighborhood a place where people actually wanted to live again. We've also stayed in touch with some of the other victims of her harassment. There's a group of about 8 households that experienced various forms of targeting from her, and we've become a tight-knit group of friends. It's funny how someone trying to divide the community actually ended up bringing us closer together. The couple who bought her house has become some of our closest friends. They're a young family with 2 small kids, and they've told us they specifically chose this neighborhood because they heard about our story and wanted to live somewhere that people stood up for each other. They found a few more disturbing things while renovating, including what appeared to be listening devices planted near the property line between their house and ours. The police took those as evidence too, and it's looking like she may face additional charges for illegal surveillance. One of the most satisfying parts of the whole aftermath has been watching the neighborhood flourish without her toxic influence. Property values have actually gone up because people want to live in a community known for handling problems effectively, rather than one ruled by fear and arbitrary enforcement. The new Homeowners Association board asked my boyfriend and me to join as advisory members, recognizing that our experience had given us valuable insights into preventing abuse of power. We accepted, and we've helped implement transparency measures and appeal processes to make sure nothing like this can happen again. Looking back on everything, I'm amazed at how much our lives changed because one unstable person decided she had the right to control other people's relationships and lives. But I'm proud that we turned what could have been a nightmare into something that made our entire community stronger. The restraining order means we don't have to worry about her coming back, and honestly, after everything that's come to light about her financial crimes and other victims, I doubt she'd want to show her face around here anyway. Her reputation is completely destroyed, and everyone knows exactly what kind of person she really was. Sometimes people ask if we regret not just moving away when the harassment started. The answer is absolutely not. Running away would have just left her free to target the next people who didn't fit her narrow idea of acceptable neighbors. By standing our ground and fighting back properly, we not only protected ourselves, but probably saved future victims from going through the same thing. The experience taught us that there are people in the world who will try to use whatever small amount of power they have to control and hurt others, but they can only succeed if people let them. When you document everything, build a solid case, and refuse to be intimidated, even the most entrenched bullies can be brought down. We still live in the same house, still love our quiet neighborhood, and we're planning our wedding for next spring. The venue will be our backyard, surrounded by the neighbors who've become our extended family and the community we helped save from a tyrant. She tried to destroy our relationship and drive us away, but instead she ended up giving us the chance to prove how strong we are together and to build something better in the place she tried to tear down. Sometimes the best revenge really is living well, especially when you can help others do the same. The next one is a pro-revenge story. I worked for a company that provides specialized equipment used in manufacturing. To protect my anonymity, I'll have to be vague about what exactly this machine does. During my time working in this field, I got to know many clients who would need these machines installed and serviced. One of these customers we'll call Jake. I later left the company too for a different job, but Jake apparently kept my number. One afternoon, I got a call from Jake that they wanted a new unit installing and another unit needed maintenance and wanted to know if I was available. I let him know that I left the company but that I could pass him on to someone who could help. He tells me he'll pay 2x my current rate to install the unit over the weekend. He lets me know that the company has increased the rates for installation and the company just can't afford it. The instructions they sent over just aren't clear enough and their engineers are scratching their heads trying to figure it out. He begs me to consider it, and I agree. For more context, installing this unit can take a good few hours, or up to a day on your own. The company gives you 2 options. You can either pay for an engineer to come and install it, or you can save money and they will send instructions so the customer's own engineers can install it. The instructions aren't easy to follow, and it's company policy that if someone has started to install the equipment, the supplier wouldn't get involved since they couldn't verify that any of the pieces were broken. This will be important later. I drive down on the weekend and they show me the boxes of equipment. I set to work and I make good progress installing the unit. Around 6 hours in and I'm stopped by Jake, who greets me. I let him know I'm nearly finished and he tells me, "Sorry, but they just don't have the budget to pay you." He understands my frustration, but his engineers can take it from here. To say I was frustrated was an understatement. I wanted revenge. There's a small button inside the unit that changes the unit into test mode. This is done to perform maintain on the unit, but it's impossible to configure the unit with this button pressed. It's only possible to reach this button using a pin, so it's not easily pressed during installation. Because of this, the installation instructions don't mention it. There's no real way of telling the equipment is in test mode. It just won't work normally. I think you can guess where this is going. I click the button, collect my things, and leave. Monday morning, I get a call from Jake. I declined. I knew my old company wouldn't get involved since I already started installing the unit. I knew his engineers would never figure it out. I just had to let him stew. A few days later, with many missed calls, I finally pick up. Jake is furious. He asks me where the hell I've been and why I haven't been picking up the phone. He tells me they can't figure it out how to configure the machine and they need my help. I tell him, "Why is this my problem? You won't pay me." He told me he was sorry and they would work something out if I could get there as soon as possible. I told him, "Oh no, you're going to pay me £7,000 up front before I do anything." I'd never felt this powerful before. He screamed at me for a bit and hung up. He called back a day later after saying he's sorry for how he acted and said that if I could come fix it, he would pay me, in a totally defeated tone. He tried to fight it, saying he'll pay when I was done, but I was having none of it. After a bit of back and forth, he agrees to pay me. The money hit my account and I came in the next day. The look of confusion over his face when I took out a pin and changed the unit from test mode was priceless. It was even more priceless seeing his reaction to me packing up my tools and leaving after only 20 minutes of configuring. Easiest £7,000 I'd ever made. Don't try to mess with a professional problem solver. The next one is a malicious compliance story. 30 years ago, when I was only about 20, I worked for a software company. It was a pretty rubbish company. Their software was rubbish because they'd employ trainees and get them to do the development on it without a senior first checking their work. Needless to say, the app often had problems. Every other month, a memo would go out to all programmers asking us to come and work the weekend, and that any time we work won't be compensated with overtime, but instead we can have the same amount of time off work later with pay, time in lieu. I never used to take holidays, but due to undiagnosed depression, I would often have a random day off as a sick day instead. One month my manager called me in and told me that there were problems with the software that needed fixing urgently, and because we were approaching the end of the year, he was talking to everyone who'd had too much time off sick and taking holiday entitlement off them. I don't recall the number of days entitlement I had, but after deducting my unauthorized illnesses from my holidays, I had only about 3 days left. I was told the aim was to stop people taking holiday they were entitled to and would have to take before the year ended, otherwise they lost it, thus giving them more work hours to fix the software. I explained to my manager that I had no intentions of booking any of my holiday and would happily work those days plus any additional required weekends, as I often did. But he insisted that this is what he had to do. I explained to him that I don't book holidays, I don't claim my time in lieu, and I just have a day off when I am having a bad day. Ultimately, the company gains from this because I work more days than I am paid for, and I don't like them treating me like this way. I asked him how many holiday days he was taking away and how many days in lieu I was owed, so I let him take my holiday away, leaving me with 3. I then asked to book those 3 days of holiday off, plus claimed about 7 days in lieu I otherwise wouldn't have taken, because the rules are that I use them or lose them, right? So now they went from having their lead developer in every day to having to give me 2 weeks off. Edit, I remember now he refused to let me take the time off. He told me I cannot have off the days I was entitled to, and that he would also be taking away the time in lieu days they owed me. I told him if he didn't also stick to the rules, then I would never work overtime again. He said that's just the way it had to be. Part 2. So, now you want to pay overtime, kind of. The directors weren't happy with how their plan to get more work had backfired, so sent out a new memo. We will be opening the doors until 8 p.m. every workday and 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. weekends. If anyone is willing to work more hours, then clock in out with Craig. If we meet our deadline, then there may be a reward for you based on how many extra hours you worked. My boss asked, "Will you be coming in?" I said no. He asked why not. I reminded him that I had said if they take away my days, then I won't work time in lieu again. He pointed out that it would be time in lieu plus a bonus. I pointed out that not only does it not say how much the bonus is, but it only says we may get the bonus, and then only if we meet the deadline. Far too conditional for overtime pay, so I declined. Lots of people worked lots of hours over the next week or so. One guy worked an additional 60 hours. They met the deadline, and there was indeed a bonus. For each hour they worked, each employee received a lottery ticket. At the time, they cost £1. The guy who you had to clock in out with was working 12 hours per day, 7 days per week. He came over to gloat at how many lottery tickets he had. He said, "Potentially they've given me millions." I told him, not only have they paid you £1 per hour overtime, which is less than half of what I got as a child working in a supermarket, they've not even allowed you to choose what you want to spend your money on. One person won £10. I am the only one who conformed to the requirements being forced on me. Everyone else allowed them to take days away and still didn't claim their remaining owed days in lieu. And I am the only one who didn't get ripped off. Yes, I did laugh at everyone. Anyway, thank you for watching.